Hi, and welcome to Seen and Heard. My name is Allison Tristao, and I'm the Community Field Representative at Western United Dairies. Today we have Jason Bryant on the podcast. He is the lobbyist for Western United Dairies, and he will be giving us an update on where the legislator's at. So let's get into it.
Yosemite Farm Credit is the farmer's choice for agriculture financing. As a farmer-owned cooperative, we are dedicated to serving our neighbors in the agriculture community with financial products and services tailored to your operation and backed with the relationship you can trust. Whether you're purchasing real estate, making improvements to the dairy, or wanting to purchase or lease equipment, we're here to help our members prosper. Visit our website at YosemiteFarmCredit.com to find a branch location nearest you.
Pacific Gas and Electric is here to remind you that signs keep you safe. Sections of our natural gas transmission pipeline travel underground and beneath agricultural land. For the safety of you, your family, and your employees, pipeline markers are placed to indicate the approximate location of the pipe as a reminder to use extra care. Removing a pipeline marker creates a serious safety hazard. To have additional markers placed or report damaged or missing markers, please call your PG&E account manager or our agricultural customer service center at 877-311-3276. To learn more, visit www.pge.com/agsafety. Remember, signs keep you safe.
How are you today, Jason?
I'm doing great. Good afternoon. Thanks for letting me be a part of the Western United Dairies podcast.
Definitely. So can you let us know where things are in the legislature right now with the governor's office on his signature bills and anything that really impacts our members or the business community?
We've certainly had a busy year in the Capitol. On September 14th was the last day of the 2023 legislative session. And during the session, lawmakers introduced over 3,000 measures. And in the final 2 weeks of the legislative session, the legislature sent nearly 900 bills to the governor for his consideration. And it was October 14th, 2 Saturdays ago, or actually last Saturday, as it were, it was the final day for the governor to sign or veto measures that were on his desk. And so we saw a lot of activity towards the end of the session. And there was a number of really high priority and high profile issues that were considered, and many of you listening probably read about some of these. There were bills that would expand employee rights and wages, including a bill to expand unemployment benefits for striking workers, a bill the bill that the governor vetoed here in the last week. Would reform the state's mental health and behavioral health system. This was actually a piece of legislation that was driven by the governor as his top priority this year, which will place before voters on the March primary ballot next year a bond, which will make meaningful investments in housing as well as big investments in mental health and behavioral health care, and help the state address those individuals who are often homeless, who struggle with mental health, behavioral health, and addiction issues. And so this is a major priority of the governor, is to tackle the homelessness issue. And this is the bond which will help him address these issues. That will be on the ballot in March. So that bill went through the process this year. We also saw bills that streamlined the construction of new housing. Obviously, that's a priority of this legislature, is to see new housing opportunities in a very difficult housing market for many families. And we also saw legislation that would change voter thresholds for the adoption of new fees and taxes, particularly at the local level, where cities and counties are looking to establish new revenue sources for programs and services. So we saw high-profile bills in that category as well.
So Jason, along with everything you just talked about in the legislature, what other significant things happened at the state level that you want to discuss?
Yeah, there were two really big shifts that are occurring both in the state Senate and in the state assembly. In July, the state assembly elected the speaker, Robert Rivas, from Salinas, as the new speaker. And that has ushered in a new leadership team in the state assembly. It shook up some of the committee chairmanships, some of the leadership positions in the assembly, and it's expected to shake up other membership positions within different committees. And so having a new speaker, means a lot of changes in the assembly, and a new era of leadership in that house. And so it's been exciting to see the new speaker, who does have significant experience and background in agriculture. Before being elected speaker, Robert Rivas was the chair of the Assembly Agriculture Committee. And so Western United Dairies enjoyed a really good relationship with the speaker. When he was chair of that committee, worked closely with him on a number of key issues. And so we're really optimistic that the future with our relationship with the speaker is going to be strong. In the state Senate, in the final week or so of the session, the Senate has voted to elect Senator Mike McGuire as the next pro tem. That would begin sometime in 2024. The transition between current pro tem Senator Tony Atkins and Senator Mike McGuire will happen sometime between January and probably April of next year. I think that's all being worked out in real time. So we'll see a transition in the Senate too next year, and that's going to usher in new leadership in the committees, new leadership in positions of leadership within the pro tem's office and staff, presumably. And so it's exciting to see that transition take shape. Many of us and many of you listening probably know Senator Mike McGuire. He's from Sonoma County, Marin County, and up to the North Coast, representing many counties on the North Coast up to Del Norte County. So he's a familiar face, and I think we're optimistic that our relationship with the Pro Tem's office will continue to thrive.
So Jason, what were some of the bills that Western focused on this year?
Yeah, this was a big part of, what the Western United Dairies Government Affairs Program is focused on, and that's really taking on some of the bigger legislative issues that we see every year. And this year was a busy one. We focused in on a couple of really key legislative priorities. The first bill being Assembly Bill 554 by Jesse Gabriel. Actually, a legislator that we have a good relationship with, frankly. But just because we have a good relationship doesn't always mean we agree on every bill. And in this case, the bill would have allowed established a new private right of action for organizations, particularly the SPCA organizations, to file lawsuits in the civil courts alleging animal abuse for anybody who has possession and who is in animal agriculture. And this would give these organizations a new ability to bring litigation, potentially endless litigation, against dairy farmers who are, working with animals and providing, a commodity and providing dairy products to Californians. There are organizations, as we know, that exist who really believe that any type of animal agriculture production is by definition animal abuse in their view. And they want to, go after and try to stop or limit that activity by alleging that what we do as an industry is in fact of in itself animal abuse. And of course, that's a preposterous and ridiculous presumption. Yet we see bills introduced in the legislature that would allow organizations to have new abilities to bring litigation alleging animal abuse, even if the activities in which we treat and maintain and provide dairy products is in line with state and federal standards, and even goes above and beyond state and federal standards. And so we were quick to the draw on this bill, worked closely and built a very diverse coalition of stakeholders, including obviously Western United Dairies, the California Cattlemen's Association, the Poultry Federation, farm bureaus, state and local, and a variety of other organizations that work within agriculture including the zoos and the Western Fairs Association and other groups that were attracted to this bill, including rodeo and other organizations that care for animals. This organization and coalition came together to push back on this bill, and as it were, after several committee hearings, the author decided to not take up the bill on the assembly floor, called our coalition and said, we're going to be giving up on this bill this year, and decided not to move forward. That was against the backdrop of a really strong coalition to try to really narrow the bill, which of course the sponsors would never agree to. And so I think the author grew frustrated with the process of the sponsors not willing to negotiate and roll the bill back significantly. And so he, I think, abandoned the bill this year. Of course, it's a 2-year bill, and it can come back in January when the legislature reconvenes. So we have to stay diligent and stay connected to the author and try to make sure that this bill doesn't get a hearing come January. So a very busy year on the legislative front, particularly as it relates to animal welfare issues. But we're pleased to see that bill being shelved for the year. On school nutrition issues, we were working very closely this year with Senator Skinner, the author of SB 348. And this bill had to deal with sugar content in school lunches and school breakfasts. And the author, with great intent, wants to ensure that school meals don't contain significant amounts of sugar, and it was looking to reduce the amount of sugar that would be consumed during the school day for a student who's participating in a breakfast or lunch program. And of course, as you might know, a few years ago, the state has expanded the school lunch program to provide school lunches for all students, regardless of income level, regardless if they are participating in a school lunch program. If you go to school and you want a lunch, there's a lunch available for you. And that was a new policy that the legislature enacted a few years ago. Of course, we're excited to see the school lunch program expanded. Dairy is a key component and core component of the school lunch program. And that's not by accident. What this bill really did was try to, limit the amount of sugar that's intaked by students. But what we were concerned about is that when we reduce the amount of sugar that is afforded in these programs, we want to make sure that we're not just looking at just sugar, but we're also looking at nutrient density. And we all know that flavored milk is a key component of the school lunch program. And we know that the industry has been on the forefront and leading edge of reducing the amount of sugar that you find in a quart of milk, particularly chocolate milk. And as I'm told, there's new advancements on this front that have reduced the amount of sugar per quart down to about 6 grams of sugar, which is really low compared to perhaps a decade ago, where it was much more. And so there is added sugar in flavored milk. We know that is an attractive piece of flavored milk and the product that students enjoy. So, with the added sugar in milk, students are of course afforded the ability to have access to that nutrition and protein that the milk provides. And so we were able to work through some amendments to 348 that were really critical to protecting dairy and dairy products in the school lunch program. And what the bill now does is it does limit the amount of sugar that can be provided in a school meal, but it also balances that with nutrient density. And so school districts and those that prepare and plan meals within schools need to look at maximum daily sugar allotments, need to comport that with the federal standards, but also they need to look at nutrient density when they're meal setting. We don't want to see a school district substitute a nutrient-dense dairy product or any other type of product that's nutrient-dense that has added sugar and substitute that for something that has added sugar that has zero or very little nutrient density. You're just sort of moving around, the goalposts. We think that as you reduce sugar, you also need to take in consideration the things that are constituted in those products that are of value. And so that was how the bill has been amended. And we're happy to see the bill signed into law. We did not take an opposed position on the bill. In fact, we worked closely with the author's office to make sure the amendments protected dairy and dairy products as we are looking as a state to reduce the amount of sugar that's provided. So we're really pleased with the outcome of that bill.
So we've been hearing a lot about budget shortfalls in Sacramento. Can you tell our audience more about that?
Yeah, it's a topic that's on the minds of all of us that are in government affairs and everybody who's in office. As we saw the governor reviewing, the hundreds of bills that had been sent to his desk towards the end of session, the policy that's contained in those bills are always weighed against the cost to implement those bills. And we saw a number of bills vetoed this year, perhaps not because the policy was disagreeable or there wasn't agreement around what the bill was about, but the veto came because there was a concern about ongoing costs to implement the idea. And we saw the governor cite costs as a concern in a lot of his vetoes, particularly in the last couple of weeks of session. So we saw that play out. We saw at the beginning of the year the fiscal condition of the state. We began the calendar year with a $30 billion deficit. Most of that deficit was sort of covered by borrowing or deferring programs and some budget cuts in the wake of that fiscal news. The most recent fiscal forecasts of the state's major revenue sources provide a signal that about $9.5 billion increase above projections. So recently, some of the economic forecasts actually signal that we have a bit of a budget surplus over the forecasts of the deficit that came earlier this year. And so I think that's all to say that it's a very bumpy ride. And in the beginning of the year, we saw concerns around multiple billions of dollars deficits, and now we're seeing potentially a turn for the better. But it's all very volatile. And, with the fact that we see receipts go up and then above expectations, I think we're cautiously optimistic that we've got a better condition in 2024 than we perhaps thought even just a few months ago. But we do know that, it is a difficult economic environment. Inflation is still relatively high. Interest rates are really high compared to just 2 years ago. And we're not seeing the types of sales in real estate that we've seen in the last couple of years. And of course, the stock market has been really bumpy up and down. I think we're all sensitive to that. So I think we're cautiously optimistic that we're not going to see massive budget deficits heading into 2024. But I do think most realists are thinking that we are going to be looking at a deficit in January. The question is, what is it? Is it 10 billion? Is it 20? Is it 30? Is it more than that? And I think we really need to see what tax receipts look like in quarter 3, quarter 4 of this year. And all eyes are on some of those economic indicators, which is job growth, payroll data, and what's the inflation number look like. And I think we're all going to be watching very closely as the Department of Finance releases those numbers in January. I think that's all to say that we rely on core programs that support agriculture that are funded through the state budget. And, we are sensitive as an advocacy organization that the budget condition affects the ability for us to pull down dollars to support key programs that are important to agriculture. And so we saw investments this year that were important. In the wake of flooding, we saw major investment in water and flood response and preparation coming out of the 23-24 state budget, nearly $500 million in one-time funding to address flood impacts and support at-risk communities, including those in the Tulare Basin. And those dollars would be used to prepare for future flood events. So we saw some major investments in areas that were hit hard by flooding. And that's thanks to, resources that are available through the general fund. Of course, we want to see dollars and money put forward to allow the industry to continue, leading the way on reducing methane emissions and being leaders on climate change and being leaders in the sustainability of producing dairy products that's not seen anywhere else in the world. So we're optimistic that by January, there'll be new investments in programs that help dairy farmers continue to kind of lead the way on reducing methane emissions and improving the sustainability of dairy. We also are optimistic that we'll see investments in programs that help repair and retool diesel emissions through new equipment, tractors, harvesters, and heavy-duty trucks. We'd like to see key investments in the farmer program, which helps fund that transition to new modern equipment that reduces emissions. And so we're optimistic that the future is better than perhaps anticipated earlier this year, but it remains to be seen. It's a bumpy economy. Some of the economic indicators have been all over the place, and we've certainly seen a downturn in the housing economy, and the stock market's been kind of up and down, as we all probably have been watching. So all eyes are on the January budget proposal. As we look ahead towards 2024, a couple of things really stand out. We are in a period of pretty significant transition, politically. Just a few weeks ago, U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein was our sitting senator, and Speaker Kevin McCarthy was serving in the U.S. House. And fast forward just a few weeks, and a lot has changed. With the sudden passing of Dianne Feinstein, Governor Newsom appointed LaFonza Butler, who is the executive director of Emily's List and a former advisor to VP Harris. That was, something that was a pretty big surprise. And if you look back at this, Governor Newsom has had the opportunity to appoint a number of really key elected officials, which is sort of unprecedented. I mean, we've seen a huge shift in elected politics in California. You've got Alex Padilla, who was appointed by Governor Newsom. Now you've got LaFonza Butler, appointed by Governor Newsom. Let's not forget Secretary of State Shirley Weber was appointed by Governor Newsom, as was Attorney General Rob Bonta. So you're looking at some significant changes in California's elected leadership, many of them at the high level coming by way of appointment. We just learned today that LaFonza Butler officially announced that she's not seeking the election for the full term, which is the election for the U.S. Senate seat is next year, of course. She's announced she's not running. There was rumors that she was going to run, which would have likely shaken up the field significantly. And then looking at the legislature, Tony Atkins has served as pro tem for a number of years and been a strong ally of ours. But it's going to be exciting to see the transition between to pro tem Atkins and pro tem elect Mike McGuire. Mike McGuire is a close ally and a known friend to the dairy industry. So I think it's exciting to see Senator McGuire transition into that role, and we're excited about working with him and his leadership team. And of course, on the Assembly side, with Speaker Robert Rivas being elected in July to become the new Speaker, there's going to be a tremendous amount of change that we've already begun to see, but there'll be more changes in 2024 as his leadership team takes shape and he begins to name new committee chairs and assigns committee assignments heading into the next session. So there's just tremendous change. And of course, on the forefront, off into the distance a little bit, we have the governor's race. And you're thinking, well, the governor's race isn't until 2026. But that race is far off, on the paper, but it's already taking shape quickly. You've got the current Lieutenant Governor, Eleni Kouliarakis, who has announced her candidacy, and she's actively running for governor, even if the race isn't until 2026. And then you've got potentially Attorney General Rob Bonta looking at entering the race as well. He has not announced, but he has expressed interest. And then you've got other candidates, of course, who have announced. And then you've got a competitive race, perhaps, for lieutenant governor in 2026. Fiona Ma, the current state treasurer, has announced she's running for lieutenant governor. And so has pro tem Tony Atkins. She's announced running for lieutenant governor. And so there's going to be a reshaping here very quickly. We're already in the midst of a significant reshaping of the leadership of California at the federal level and at statewide office. And we're going to continue to see that reshaping as Speaker Rivas and pro tem elect McGuire begin to take the gavel and retool and reshape both houses of the legislature. And we're going to see that that transition continue in 2026 when the governor's race and the other races for statewide office begin to take shape and new elected officials are named. So it's an exciting time of California politics, and to be sort of in the middle of it.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Jason.
Thanks for having me. And if there's anything that any of you all need and would like to talk more about, I'm always available to chat. Appreciate the time.
Thanks again, Jason, for coming on the podcast, and thank you to those who are listening. If you would like a notification when a new episode releases, you could subscribe to the podcast. Have a good week.
Did you know that you can turn your dairy manure into cash? Bennett Environmental is offering above-ground dairy digesters at no cost to you. These systems can also remove nitrates from your lagoons to help you comply with water board regulations. Our proven above-ground technology will generate income for your dairy into the foreseeable future. Because we truck the renewable natural gas off-site, your dairy can profit regardless of your location. Bennett Environmental, turning your wastewater liabilities into sustainable assets. Learn more at bennett-environmental.com.
Are you tired of hearing that the main way to save water is fallowing? Are you tired of seeing articles about how alfalfa and corn waste water? At Common Good Water, we combine the best-in-class subsurface drip system and precision crop management services, including pest control. Our verification program qualifies for public funding, and we want to help you continue farming in California. Contact your groundwater sustainability agency and ask how you can work with Common Good Water. Visit commongoodwater.com.
Thank you to the Western United Dairies generous business sponsors, the Morning Star Company, Holt of California, Farm Credit Alliance, PG&E, Arata, Swingle, Van Egmond and Goodwin Law Offices, Yosemite Farm Credit, F&R Ag Services, Moss Energy Works, California Dairy Magazine, Bennett Environmental, and Common Good Water. We appreciate our sponsors and thank them for their continued support. While Western United Dairies respects the varied views of our guests, please note that the opinions expressed in the Seen and Heard podcast may not necessarily reflect the positions of the Western United Dairies Board of Directors or our sponsors. If you would like more information on how to sponsor Western United Dairies or this podcast, please send us an email at info@wudairies.com.